All right, so we're gonna get ready and get started. I just want to welcome everyone. By the way, my name is Verdis Robinson, and I am the Director of Community College Engagement for Campus Compact. And we're so glad that you're part of this first of the virtual dialogue series. Thanks for taking the time out to join us for this dialogue. Again, this is not a webinar, but it is a virtual dialogue. And as I said at the beginning, if you can have video function, we would love to see your beautiful faces. As you can see, my beautiful face. I'm just joking, but it's going to be kind of an informal call. We're going to have. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Engaged Selection Project and what our goals are and who's involved in it. And then I'm going to yield the floor to first Mike Dean from Minnesota. And he will talk about this series. I mean, this part of the series is talking about voter registration and the power of community colleges. And then we're going to turn it over from Mike Dean to Connie Jorgensen from Piedmont, Virginia Community College, which is in Virginia. Shocking, but Piedmont, Virginia. Okay, my. And then we're going to turn it over to College of the Canyons, which is in California. And so what Mike Dean is going to be talking about is basically how he was able to, on voter registration day, get a lot of the community colleges in Minnesota registering to vote, and they registered over 2,000 people in Minnesota on voter registration day, which is like phenomenal. And so the different techniques and how he was able to do that. Then Connie is going to talk about how she engaged student clubs to table on for something that she called Voter Registration Week. She didn't just do it on Voter Registration Day, but Voter Registration Week, and both of them are ongoing efforts, not just on one day or one week, until the end of registration. And then Patty is going to talk about how partnering with an outside agency and some of the challenges and opportunities that has on their campus surfaced, but how they have engaged, how they have registered over 500 students on their campus, and it's an ongoing counting. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and for PowerPoint, and then I'm going to yield the floor to LeadMN, Mike Dean, to talk about voter registration in the community colleges in Minnesota, and then so forth and so on. At the end of the three speakers, they're going to be speaking for about 10 minutes apiece. We'll have ample time enough for Q&A or discussion. And again, the way that we're going to do this, and I'll repeat it later on, will be to put your name in the chat box as you have questions, and I'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself and ask your question or tell about what's going on in your campus as far as voter registration is concerned. Now, I have to let you know that this is about the power of community colleges, but the attendee was not limited to community colleges. So we do have some of our four-year partners and brothers and sisters on the call. So I think that's awesome and wonderful. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna share my screen. We'll see how this works. I think I got it. And as I said before, welcome. This is the first of the virtual dialogue series about the power of community colleges in voter registration. Let me just move that a little. There we go. And so what we're going to do, we're going to welcome, then we're going to do a project overview. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mike, Connie, and Patty to tell what they have experienced on their campuses, and then we're going to go into a dialogue, and then we're going to close the dialogue. And again, for those who are joining us, thank you for joining us. First of all, the Engage the Election project is a direct response by Campus Compact through its newly acquired the Democracy Commitment Initiative. And for those that are not familiar with Democracy Commitment was founded in 2011 to advance civic engagement and democracy work in community colleges across the nation. It is now a part of Campus Compact, and I was the national director for the past couple of years, and now I am the director of community college engagement for Campus Compact. But this project was created to leverage the midterm elections of this year, creating electoral engagement activities for community college students, most of whom are first generation, low income, and students of color. The goals for this project, we intend for this project to yield insights, ideas, practices, principles that reflect the unique challenges and the unique opportunities for community college campuses in the context of their special ties to their communities. Additionally, we intend for this project to yield and one of the things that we're going to yield, and this is the big thing, are resources that will be useful to our broader network of community colleges and community colleges in general, because there is a lack of focus on electoral engagement resources specifically for community colleges. And there are a lot of resources that are out there and a lot of great work that is being done, but not a lot for community colleges. So that's one of the biggest goals of this project, is to yield resources specifically for community colleges, of which this dialogue will contribute to. So to help us for this, we received a grant, about $27,000 from Young Invincibles and its Student Learn, Student Vote Coalition, of which I am on the board for. But we were able to give mini grants to about 14 campuses, about a total of about 1,850. That doesn't seem like a lot, but when a lot of resources and a lot of money on particular community colleges do not go toward electoral engagement, this goes far. It really, really does. And I'm sure that some of the people in participants of this grant can tell you that has already gone far. And some of the participants on this grant include Allegheny College of Maryland, College of the Canyons in California, Delta College in Michigan, Johnson County Community College in Kansas, Kingsborough Community College in New York City, or Brooklyn, I should say. They'll get me by saying New York City, but in Brooklyn, Kirkwood Community College in Iowa, Lane Community College in Oregon, Mesa in Arizona, Monroe Community College in Rochester, New York, Piedmont, Virginia Community College in Charlottesville, Raritan Valley Community College in New Jersey, Santa Fe College in Florida, Terry County College Southeast Campus in Texas, and Wilbur Wright College in Illinois, one of the city colleges of Chicago. So you can see very, very varied community colleges in resources and enrollment, as well as spread out across the country. So we're looking forward to the resources that's going to be coming out that shows the diversity of community colleges. Additionally, in addition to this dialogue, if you haven't already, please sign up for the next dialogue, which will be next week, where we'll talk about voter engagement, in which we're going to be featuring De Anza College, Santa Fe College, as well as our friends at the Campus Vote Project with some of their resources. And if you've gone on their website, I definitely encourage you to go on the Campus Vote Project website, in addition to the Student Learn, Student Vote Coalition works websites as well, for ample materials for this work. But again, we're going to be creating resources specifically for community colleges. For right now, Campus Vote Project is the best that we have, as well as Student Learn, Student Vote Coalition, as well as the All-In Challenges. in addition to that. But they're going to be with us next week. And in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about voter turnout. So in other words, after you register them, it cannot stop there. You got to educate to make informed decisions. And then it can't stop there. How do we get community college students and our communities to the polls? And so we're going to be listening to the efforts at Community College of Allegheny County and Pennsylvania, St. Clair College in Ohio, and CUNY Kingsborough Community College. As well as, again, it's going to be a dialogue. So we're going to be hearing from other colleges and campuses around the country as they join us for each one of these dialogues. So, and I just want to thank you again for being here, and please stay in touch. There is my my email address right there. It's just verdis@compact.org if you have any questions or suggestions. As well as please come to our website and join us on social media. So without further ado, I just want to introduce Mike Dean. We'll see how this works, if he can unmute himself or I have to exit the show. Hopefully I don't. Mike, can you tell me if you're able to unmute yourself?
I think I just did. Can you hear me?
Yeah, awesome.
Great.
And he has a few slides, and then Patty and Connie will be joining us via phone, and so we'll be able to hear from them afterward. So Mike Dean, he is the executive director of a nonprofit organization called LeadMN. In Minnesota. And so I'm not going to tell you about what LeadMN is, because he will. And so now I yield the floor to Mike Dean. Mike, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot, Verdis. We're really excited here to chat today, really about voter registration. And specifically, our theme is really about registering your vote, registering your voice as part of the process. So first, I thought I'd talk a little bit about who LeadMN is to give you some context, and then some of the strategies and tactics we've used to really engage students. But LeadMN is really an association of college students connecting for change. We represent the over 120,000 students that attend two-year community colleges in the state of Minnesota. And really our role is in advocating for opening up the doors to opportunity for every person in the state. So we really believe that everyone should have that opportunity to achieve their dreams really through higher education. What's unique about our organization is we are very much student-led. So we have a full-time staff of about 8, but then we also have about 70 to 80 student leaders spread across the state. First, you want to show the next slide. This kind of shows then our network then throughout the state and every one of the colleges that we engage in. So we have elected students from each of these campuses that participate in our organization. They engage in trainings, we do advocacy work, and then we also raise money for student scholarships. And so with this network, this is kind of unique, but I still think there's some lessons learned that you could potentially integrate into your own campus environment. So specifically on National Voter Registration Day, first if you want to kind of go to the next slide, we were able to have a lot of success in engaging students in a single day. So what we did is we were able to partner with outside community groups and students and recruited about 60 volunteers to do almost 420 class announcements, and I'll explain what that is. And we did this work on 20 different campuses throughout the state, and we're able to register about 2,300 students in one single day. So this is a huge undertaking, but I think, like I said, there's some key lessons learned that you can get from each of on your state. So the first real kind of key takeaway is training. So specifically with LeadMN, this is a huge part of what we do, and there's really 3 steps to kind of our training with students. One is really modeling this behavior. So when we're doing either tabling, which is having a table in a high traffic area, or we engage in these class announcements, what we always work with the students to do is model how is this work done. So we'll kind of give an example and actually have a student randomly come up, and we'll kind of show them how we engage in these conversations. Then the second step is we often then have a printed out sample script that we use, and then from there really give the students the ability to edit or really customize it to their liking. I think sometimes we really kind of just, groups can tend to want to give them and force everyone to say the same exact thing. But what we've noticed is really giving students the flexibility to really kind of make the script their own as a way to ensure that success. And then from there, and this is the most critical, it's really role playing this. And so how we've been able to get so many students, so many volunteers to really be successful in registering students is to actually practice. And having them go out and do a sample, essentially class rap or table with another student gets them more comfortable with it. We create an opportunity when we do these role plays where we actually have them go into groups of 3. And so you have one student that's doing the class rap, you have one student who is kind of listening, and then you have another student who is looking and providing feedback. So after each one of these, they're essentially talking about what they think the student did well, what did they think they could improve upon, and using that to get constructive feedback, then to really sort of improve the process. So this is exciting for them because it gets their hands dirty a little bit. It starts to kind of overcome some of those fears that they may have going into a classroom or just talking to random strangers. That starts to build up that confidence that helps them be really successful. And then the last piece here, the next slide, Verdis, is about our class wraps. And we call them class wraps. You can call them class announcements. But essentially, they're just a very short message that faculty allow us to speak in the first 5 minutes of class. These really have been the most effective way for us to engage students, largely because you have a captive audience there. They can't run away. And so in that sort of classroom dynamic, they're engaged, they're interested in learning, and then often the faculty members will sort of back us up and kind of support some of the work with messages after we're done. So we always kind of introduce ourselves. We talk about what the opportunity is, which is essentially the upcoming election, why they should care, why does voting matter to them, then asking them to get involved. And then a key thing here that may be kind of unique, but this is really built into our student organizing model, which is really about getting contact information for the students. So we talk about that in terms of getting their digits. Because part of what we really use this event as an opportunity for is to build up our volunteer base. So we're out there talking to students, getting them registered to vote, but we're also trying to identify more volunteers that can help us expand our work into a broader community. But we really wouldn't be able to do this without the support of faculty. So first, you want to move to the next slide. This kind of talks about our strategy to really kind of get faculty engaged. And the challenge right now is a lot of different groups are reaching out to faculty, asking them to engage and register voters. And what I have here is actually the message that we send out to faculty. And so without the faculty, we wouldn't be able to schedule the 420 class wraps that we did. And what we've done is we've tested this particular email in a variety of ways over the years and found this to be super successful. And so really what works in this is, one, putting the class name in the subject line really boosts the open rate of faculty. So here you see it's English 990. We talk about it being a civics announcement. Then two, we're really kind of customizing it from there, making sure it's directly to the individual faculty member. So you can see we introduce ourselves, we talk about how we're working with the students on their campus to do registration before the deadline. So that timeliness is kind of a second major component. And then the third is we actually make a very specific ask. Can we come into your 11 a.m. class, this topic, on this date, and deliver essentially a 5-minute announcement? And we've tried longer versions of this. We haven't tried anything shorter. We've tried more generic, and this has really essentially led to a lot of the success we've had. Last year, I think we only scheduled about 75 class wraps, and this year we were at 420 on National Voter Registration Day, and I think by October 16th, we'll probably have scheduled almost 600 class wraps when we're completely done. So I'm happy to take questions kind of later on when we engage in the dialogue, but wanted to give you kind of a few tips on how we really drive voter engagement then throughout the process.
All right, great. Thank you, Michael. I mean, over 2,000 voter registrations in one day. Is that a record?
For us, it is. There are other groups that actually got more. So Move San Antonio, I think, got 5,000 registered this year on National Voter Registration Day. But they beat us once again. But I think we're probably going to be the second highest when you look nationally.
Yeah, and so for everyone on the call, so that you know, LeadMN was not part of the grant, but they are a part of the Student Learn Student Vote Coalition, and so and have benefited from that as well. Um, I think on National Voter Registration Day, they said it was about 800,000 people were registered, not just students, but across the nation, which is phenomenal. And with our project, we registered about 1,600 so far that we know of, just with the 14 campuses that we had. So kudos to LeadMN. So now what we're going to do is we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to go to a college campus in Virginia. This Virginia Community College campus has had some challenges in the past year, being in Charlottesville. And we don't need to talk about that today. I would love to talk about that more. I love because especially how the community college is engaging in dialogues and things like that. But for the purposes of voter registration, Connie, can you tell us how what efforts that you have done in the past couple of years for engaging students or students engaging students to register voters on your campus?
I would love to. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. First off, thanks for having me. We are a relatively small community college. We're about 5,000 students. And as far as civic engagement goes, we're a one-person shop. It's me. So there are some restrictions in terms of time and resources and so on. And I'm sure many of you face those exact same restrictions. So what we do during Register to Vote Week is, National Register to Voter Registration Day, we make it a week. And we have a different club register voters every day. So they're reaching out to different sets of friends and different sets of classmates and so on and so forth. The other thing we do is we reach out through emails, which, students don't read their emails much anymore, but it's surprising that it is effective. We reach out to emails to faculty and staff. We engage our faculty to register voters during their classes on NVRD, and the next day in case they don't have classes on Tuesday. We put up notices on Blackboard, our LMS, and we engage our art department. Our graphics design department has designed great posters for us to remind people to register to vote and, announcing our registration efforts and so on and so forth. So that's worked relatively well. In terms of training, I just learned a whole lot from Mike, and I'm going to institute a lot of what he was doing. But what I do is the Virginia Department of Elections requires that third-party election or registration drives do this online training. So I have 3 interns from Campus Vote Project, and I require that they go through that. And then with each club, I require that at least one come in and sit down with me and go through training on how to register a voter. So in other words, I'm doing kind of a train the trainer system, which has worked relatively well, although I'd like to do a whole lot more. My interns are always there for every day of the Register to Vote drive. So they're much better trained, and they're there to answer any kind of questions that come up. The biggest challenge we have is, while we don't have scripts, some of the club members, they're at their default mode is to just sit back at the table and let people come to them. And as you know, that doesn't work. We need to train them to be more assertive and tell people why they need to vote, and so on and so forth. But I learned a huge, huge lesson last week in that I told you we're a one-person shop. and I was sick all week. So what I learned is you have to have backup. And I was really lucky that I had these interns, but I was also really lucky that the guy in the office next door to me was willing to take orders over email while I was homesick. So one thing that I will do from now on is I will plan for somebody who will be trained to take charge in case I'm sick or I'm out for some reason, because we could have had a disaster had my interns not stepped up to the plate and basically took over for me. So I'm about to prove that I can actually speak for less than 10 minutes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that we have later on.
All right, great. Thank you, Connie. And I just want to ask you one question. How many people can you estimate that you registered last week?
We're having still some interesting challenges getting numbers in, but I would say at least 120, maybe 150.
All right, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go from the East Coast and we go all the way to the West Coast, where it's still morning. And
yes, it is. And
yeah,
sorry, Verdis.
Yeah, and I think you have a little bit better weather than we're having here in Boston. It's a very cloudy day, and the weather just turned on us. But I think it's still like almost 80 degrees there. So we're gonna go to Patty Robinson. No relation, but kind of. She's my adopted cousin. Patty Robinson from College of the Canyons, who's the faculty director for civic and community engagement initiatives at, again, College of the Canyons, which is just outside of Los Angeles. So I yield the floor to Patty Robinson to talk about engaging outside organizations to register to vote, and some of the challenges and some of the rewards that she has experienced at College of the Canyons.
Well, thank you, Verdis. It's a pleasure to address this topic with everyone. And I must admit, I'm looking at clouds right now. We haven't had rain clouds in a long time, so I'm very happy to see them. But to give you an idea of College of the Canyons, we are located in North LA County. Just to give you a perspective of the system here in California, we are one of 114 community colleges. We have a student body of about 20,000 students. Certainly not the largest of the community colleges, but certainly not one of the smallest. With regard to civic engagement, my role is, in fact, 100% working with civic engagement and community-based learning. And this role is about 3 years old at this point. Historically, when we look at how voter registration has taken place on our campus, it primarily has been done, I don't want to say sporadically, but there hasn't really been kind of an overall plan. And so this grant has really allowed us to focus very nicely on coming up with a plan that we can now take forward for the future. Voter registration on our campus is typically and has traditionally been sort of instigated and implemented through our student development office. There really has never been a connection with academic affairs. Because I am coming from academic affairs, we're now being able to bridge those two aspects of the community, which is really nice because it's allowing for a better connection, I think, with both students and faculty. Voter registration tables and events have started since the first week of our semester. We have a lot of individuals who actually come from off campus and who will be on campus almost every day, or at least I'd say 2 to 3 times during the week. We've had our organized efforts where we've gotten our own students, and particularly through our student body, our student government, who have been actively recruiting and registering students. But what we have found is that we've had a lot of participation by actually connecting with outside organizations. Most importantly, two groups that we have partnered with is NextGen and also the Feminist Majority Foundation. Ironically enough, I know some people would say, well, aren't they partisan? Is that something that, you know, should be going on campus? What I can tell you is that groups that come onto campus cannot just set up a table and then start registering voters. They, in fact, are vetted through an application process through our student development office. They cannot be partisan, even though some might argue that some groups may, in fact, be more partisan, but in fact, they take a stand that they are not. Once vetted and once the application process is approved, they then are able to come onto campus. Interestingly enough, we do allow these individuals, they can have literature discussing either a proposition or a candidate, but they themselves cannot take a stand when they are talking with students. So it's a very interesting kind of dynamic. And the reason that this exists this way is because we want to enable free speech. And so that is a huge component of this. What we have found by working with our Civic Engagement Steering Committee, our Associated Student Government, and now bringing in various club members, we have been able, as I said, to partner with some of these groups. More importantly, what has happened is that through this partnership, we've actually reached out and been able to have more of a consistent presence where students are now seeing these groups on a regular basis. While last week was voter registration day, there was you know, a lot of activity, but at the same time, these groups are in fact appearing every week. And so up to this time of our registration process, we actually have over 500 students that have been registered. One of the things that has also been happening that's somewhat related to this that is very important is that we have served as a polling place historically on our campus. Unfortunately, this time around, as a midterm election, we were not going to have this polling place on campus. So I did a little calling with the LA Registrar's Office to find out, you know, why, and also, quite frankly, where it's located for the past, or has been located for the last 20 years, is a really bad location. So I was trying to find out more information of where we could, in fact, reconfigure the polling place. In all of this discussion, we were able to actually get a ballot box, which is going to be dropped off on our campus on Tuesday, which is going to allow us 22 days before the election for individuals who have mail-in ballots to now bring their ballots to drop off their ballots. So as part of our registration process of getting students to register, we are encouraging them to also consider the mail-in ballot option, where they can then get that mail-in ballot, bring it directly to campus, drop it off in our drop box, which will be picked up twice a week by the LA County Registrar's Office. Also, we've been able to partner with outside groups like our League of Women Voters of Santa Clarita. They have been very helpful, and we're running different events, again, where we're bringing in the education component, but also trying to register students at the same time. And then one last thing that I've done, which we've never had on our campus, I've never seen it again in 20 years, is I constructed a very detailed letter as well as a handout that had many, many different kinds of links to resources, which I've sent out multiple times for faculty to share with students to help them know where to go. And then lastly, we have a faculty member who created a quick response scan, and we've just had bookmarks created where we're going to be passing those out, so students literally can just scan the QR code and go directly to our state registrar's office, or excuse me, our Secretary of State's office, to the link and register by mail, or excuse me, register via online, and then request the mail-in ballot. So we've done a lot of things differently this year than we've ever had in the past.
Yeah, thank you. And you said that you've registered 500 students so far?
Actually, over 500.
Over 500. Wow. And still counting, still going.
And yes, and again, we have more events and activities planned. Again, working very closely with these outside groups, which has been, very, very helpful for us. What we have found, because we all know that many community college students, they are strapped for time. They don't have a lot of the extra kinds of resources or time commitments, or I should say the time to commit. But when you have agencies or organizations coming in who already have things kind of set up, it's very easy then for students to say, oh yeah, I can work for a couple of hours here or there. And so that has been extremely helpful for us.
Okay, so if you're not able to get the student volunteers or to go to that level, these outside agencies, I believe, for you have been instrumental in registering students to vote. I wonder what could happen if those outside agencies were able to even train some students, or even to train some like with Connie's idea of engaging the student clubs and training them, and that type of thing could be interesting for next year's effort. Is that something that you think could happen? Almost like what LeadMN does to community college students across Minnesota. Do you think that that could be something that that these outside agencies would be willing to do?
Yes, I would say definitely so. Certainly, I know that the contacts that I'm working with the Feminist Majority Foundation, as well as Next Gen, would do that. I'm guessing in a flash. I also know with our League of Women Voters, which we've only been in existence now for a little over a year, we actually are having 2 events where we're discussing the propositions. This is very common at the League, and certainly the Los Angeles chapter does this every year. It's one of the biggest kinds of resources for educational purposes with propositions. And so we actually are having multiple events where we're holding these training, or not the training, but the education, if you will, of these propositions with our campus community. I think we all know that propositions oftentimes are just sort of overlooked, unless there's one that you really know about. So we're definitely trying to educate folks.
All right, wonderful. So that was Patty Robinson from College of the Canyons in California. Thanks for joining us on this call. So at this time, what I would like to do is, I do have some questions for our guests here that talked about some of their experiences, which is kind of varied, very much so, different types of engagement. A couple of them that are mostly students registering other students, one that is tabling, one that is actually going into classrooms, and one is outside agency tabling. So very different forms of registration. I like to really open it up to hear if you have any questions, or what's going on in your campus for voter registration, or some of the challenges, or some of the successes that you've had. So if you would like to speak, or like to share, or like to ask a question, please sign up in the chat room, the chat box there, by putting your name, and I'll call on you and things of that nature. If you can't unmute yourself, I'll just unmute everyone. But
you are unmuted.
Oh, everyone's unmuted. Okay. Woo. Okay. So that was interesting. I never had that happen before. Feel free to mute yourself now, if you like. I just unmuted everyone, and I guess we heard that. So that being said, let's enter a little dialogue for the last 10 or so minutes. But one thing that I would like to ask Mike, let's see, I think we have a little echo going, so maybe I'll just mute everyone. Let's see. Yes. All right. So now what you can do is you can unmute yourself. There was a little echo there. I'm not sure where that was coming from, but yeah, at least we can see each other, that type of thing. But so, Mike, I have a question for you. As far as what for your trainings for even if it's not just students registering other students, if you like to register someone to vote, I mean, it's not like I'm just going to get a bunch of forms and go out there and just register a whole bunch of people. What are the how do you train your students to talk to get other students to register? What do you tell them not to do or not to say?
So number one is obviously just the partisanship. So don't talk about candidates, those sorts of things. We do talk about issues. It's mainly higher ed issues. So we actually encourage them to talk about the high cost of college, using this as a way to really sort of motivate folks. So I actually start all of my class wraps out with kind of a unique phrase. I basically ask the students, do you feel you pay too little for your tuition? And so it's a weird way of asking it, but it actually gets them to think a little bit. And so no one raises their hand. And then I talk about, unfortunately, there's some people that feel tuition is not high enough and they want to raise tuition. And then using that as a way to talk about the high cost of college, and that voting is a way to have your voice heard, to send a message that we need to make college more affordable. So I think that's piece number one. I think piece number two is just having them understand then the voter registration rules, and particularly the common mistakes that people make on voter registration forms. So we've actually done a really good job with this, that in years past, there is normally an error rate of about 10 to 15%. We've been able to pretty much squash that down to virtually nothing. And so one of the things I often do during my class wrap is sort of say the common mistakes people forget to do is, one, sign it. They forget to put their social security number, last 4 digits of social security number or driver's license, and then they forget to put their birth date on. And so by pointing out those common mistakes, it actually reduces the likelihood. And then a key part of what we do is we train the students to go through and actually review every application as they're coming in. That way they're able to address those mistakes right there on the spot. So those are kind of the key pieces. But I think the number one challenge I think students have is just the confidence to go out and do this. And so by doing these, both modeling and the role playing, that really reduces those type of challenges that they face. And then from there, that student-to-student interaction, we've just found so much more successful. So when we have students out there doing this, on average, they're getting about 5 students per class to be signed up. When we have, no offense to the league, but the league numbers tend to be a little bit lower. And it's just, I think the students in the class have a hard time sort of relating to somebody who's in their 60s or 70s, so they're less likely to do it. And so we have seen the numbers be significantly higher when we have students do that interaction.
Okay, thank you. And there is a question on the floor. The question on the floor is not related to registration per se, and we can go here. It's related to candidate forms. Again, registering to vote is another thing, but to have students and utilizing the community college as a voter education platform is one thing when they're registered. Then who's on the ballot and what do they stand for and who to vote for, and also to motivate students to actually go out there and vote by having forums on their campus. And so Gabe from Wilbur Wright College has have any colleges on the call, not just our speakers, but anyone on the call. And I see Teresa from Maricopa. How you doing? If anyone has any success in hosting candidate forums, and do you have any advice for that?
I can. Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, Verdis?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. This is Teresa Tandick from Scottsdale Community College, which is one of the Maricopa colleges in Phoenix. We have some very specific policy that we have to follow regarding candidate forums, but we are having one coming up. it will be October 18th in the evening. Our student government, which is called Council of Student Leaders, is partnering with a nonpartisan group in Scottsdale called Scottsdale Coalition for Today and Tomorrow. And we're hosting a city council candidates forum. And we've let Scott handle all of the invitations to the candidates. They are training our student government students to understand the issues, but it will be the students who are going to moderate the entire candidate forum, welcome everybody. Everyone will have an assignment in the room. So we're getting that information out across Scottsdale. We hope we'll have a good crowd, and I guess I'll let you know how it goes. That's not until October 18th, so we'll see how it goes.
All right, great. And I know at Piedmont, Virginia Community College, they've had some candidate forums. In fact, they had a mock forum. In other words, they had a mock debate in which, you know, a couple of students were pretended to be like the candidates. They did their research and things like that. And I know that Connie has to go to a class at 2, so I'm not going to put her on the spot. But for voter education, I definitely would encourage you to come back next, the same time, same bat channel, same bats, time next week as we get more into education. But does anybody have any questions for registration? Because one thing that training is essential, and I like the role play, because one thing that I've seen is that people shame people for not being registered or they say their voice, their vote doesn't count, to be kind of harsh with them. But I think a real understanding of why people feel that, and why students feel that their voices do not count and that their vote doesn't count, and to engage that in a dialogue and not a shaming type thing, or is essential. So again, I can only stress that for role playing, training, things like that, before you put a student out there or anyone out there to register people to vote, I think will be more successful than just code. Here's a bunch of forms, just go and fill them and get people to fill them out. Any other people, anyone else on the call have any other suggestions that has worked, or any questions that they may have? I do have one question for Patty, though, right quick before we end this call. Patty, I will unmute you because I know you're on your cell phone.
Okay.
All right, you're unmuted. So I know they have the vetting process, but and I know that you work with NextGen, another kind of partisan way. So how do you make sure that even though they fill out the forms, and I know that you can get into trouble if people are on your campus and they are soliciting for a certain party or a certain group or even a certain ballot initiative, especially being a public institution. And sometimes our budget is dependent upon the county executive. The county executive is partisan. So it can get kind of sticky, and some people don't want to even go there. So some people will even block any outside agencies, including people like even LeadMN, from coming on their campus. So how are you able to make sure, maybe someone on your campus was able to make sure, is there a monitoring process that happens? Do people come by every once in a while to make sure that the outside agency is doing what they said they were going to do?
To my knowledge, yes. And again, because I have not been the specific person involved with the vetting process, but because this has been going on for a very long time through our student development office, my understanding is, yes, that again, there is at least one, if not two individuals, both of whom obviously, pay very close attention to who these folks are and the application process, and then also do make sure that, there is a kind of a check and balance, that there is not any sort of partisanship taking place. So that is what I'm aware of. And I know this is, again, it's something that For some campuses, it would be very difficult, but it seems to have worked very well for us for many years.
All right, great. And before we leave, one thing I do want to share with you is the importance of education even during the registering process. In other words, some of our students, some of them have been incarcerated in the past. One of my students was 56 years old and was incarcerated for the majority of his adult life. And at 56 years old, he came to the community college because that was the only place for him. And we were engaged in the election. This is 2008. And he felt, and he was never registered to vote. And he was like, well, I've been incarcerated, but so I can't register. Well, we found out through educating ourselves that, in fact, because he was off the books, he was off of parole, he did his time and he did his parole, that he was in fact eligible to vote. He didn't know that unless we had inquired, unless we had educated ourselves and things of that nature. And so for that year, he voted for the very first time in his life. And that was very, very powerful. And he was able to share his story by writing a letter to, while writing an assignment in class. And that assignment was then sent to the local newspapers and they had published it. So we don't even know how many people he had inspired by telling his story and how he had voted for the first time and didn't know that he could, and how he felt something. He felt that he was a citizen. He felt that he was a part of this country. And that is one of the powers of the community college students that they have. They are the social capital of their communities, and they are its leaders. And so if we can engage that, we can truly engage our elections and show the power of our community colleges. So with that being said, thank you for attending the first virtual dialogue series for Engage the Election 2018. We have 2 more coming, one next week and one next Thursday. And I hope that all you can join us. Feel free to let people know that this is going on. It was recorded so that we can have this for as a resource. I will be blogging about this call and about some of the resources that we have out there, and look out for the creation of new resources coming from Campus Compact. All right, with that being said, have a good day, everyone. And again, thanks for joining us.